Like we have about 1 minute before we'll get started.
Jack said he'll be 1 to 5 minutes late.
Okay. Is that mayor time or is that Jack time?
I think that's Jack time.
Okay.
Not yours.
Okay.
He'd be on time. That's some extra food. I didn't bring any chocolate this time. It's nothing. You can have different channels, but oh, I forgot to put the little stickers. Wasn't put little stickers on the push. Forgot about that. We'll have next time.
So we're not going to do it like this, right? This is saying roll call, citizen comments. Are we doing this first?
No, we go. Yeah, I guess.
Oh, no, I
that was
guess,
an
okay, so
afterthought.
that's,
So do a roll call, and we can push that afterwards. Well, no, I guess.
oh yeah, no, okay, all right, that's right.
Roll call,
Yeah,
we'll do our
okay.
thing, and then get to citizens, and then read the ordinance,
Okay,
if it gets approved. So I think that would still be all right.
okay, that's fine. All right, I've got 6:30. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the special council meeting, February 29th, or excuse me, February 20th, 2018. We'll start out with a roll call. I know Mrs. Hoffman's looking at something else.
Mr. Burke? Here. Mr. Cahill?
Here.
Ms. Kyle? Here. Mr. Skidmore? Ms. Sudkamp?
Here.
Ms. Cahill?
Here.
Mr. Montgomery? Here. Ms. Skidmore?
Here.
Ms. Pitts?
Here.
Mr. Nicely? Ms. Fetty? Here. Mr. Blankenship?
Here. All right, we have a quorum. We've got a brief presentation here that our city administrator, Matt Kramer's prepared.
Okay, so what the staff and I have done over the last few meetings that we've had, we tried to address some of the issues that have been brought up that may not have been completely factual, or they weren't in line with what's really going on. We haven't been a chance to kind of address everything. So this was just kind of some clarifications on some topics. Police chief, fire chief, and our economic development director is going to kind of talk about them. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask them. This is kind of an opportunity to get some clarification, because we've had a lot of questions from the council over the last couple of weeks. So this is kind of accumulating all of them and putting some up there. So if, Chief Brindle, if you could come up and kind of quickly address some of the traffic conditions that we've had over the time.
Good evening. Turn the mic on if you wouldn't mind, Chief. There you go.
It's all
Can you hear?
There you go.
Is it on? Okay. We went back over the past several meetings. One of the biggest things is traffic. How it's going to increase traffic, how it's going to increase accidents and that. We went back to 2015, and we have found on Narrows Road 2 accidents have occurred. One near Brightleaf Boulevard. The other one was motorist struck a house because he was having a heart attack while driving and went off the road. Those are only 2 accidents we have in our records from January of 2015. We put radar stealth thing that can count traffic and stuff. We put it on Surrey Place out there, right past Delphi. For a 7-day period, there's 4,462 vehicles a day traveling Narrows Road. The average speed was 35 miles an hour. And just to compare that, it was about 35% less than another street that we did in Erlanger about a month and a half before. So it was about 35% of the traffic of that street to that. Any questions on that? Yes, sir. Stevenson Road.
The next slide will have Fire Chief wanting to make a couple statements about it.
First of all, I want to preface this by saying that I, as a public safety official, am very grateful for the passion that the citizens show for public safety. I've been in the audience for the past couple months and listened to a lot of concerns, and again, I appreciate that. My job is not whether to say what I think this should go in there. This is not in my job classification. I'm not a developer, I'm not a home builder, I'm not a zoning guy. I'm a public safety guy. And I wanted to address some of the concerns specifically that some citizens and former, I think, firefighters here had mentioned. There were some concerns about the one-way streets and the no access into the residences. We have several dead-end streets in the city of Erlanger, and we're prepared for that. That is nothing new. We're able to pre-plan all of that. And that's what we do in public safety. We plan, we prepare, and we train. So, again, I don't want to say yay or nay on this. I'm just telling you what our job is to prepare. There was also a lot of talk about the cluster homes and the worry from some of the citizens that if one catches on fire, they're all going to catch on fire. That is a concern, yes. Somebody had mentioned Gatlinburg, and obviously that was a wildfire, and if you read that report, there were 4 days before there were any fire suppression activities started on that. And I can promise you this, I can make one promise, that it will not take 4 days to put any water on a fire if we are unfortunate if we have anything
Good to
there.
know.
There was also some mention about the state fire marshal and why he wasn't up here inspecting these and concerned about that. Well, in 31 years of fire industry, fire service, I've never seen the state fire marshal come up and do a private residence inspection. Furthermore, he's following NFPA code number 1, which is what the city follows. So there is nothing in this proposal that doesn't meet code according to what we follow. Again, I'm not a thumbs up, thumbs down. Any kind of building to me, no matter what type of construction, is going to be a safety hazard. Has the potential to be. But whatever they decide to do, and these folks decide to do, our department will make sure that we plan, we pre-plan, we train, and we're prepared to fight any kind of emergency that'll we may meet. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Anybody have any questions for Chief right now? Chief Williger.
I just have a comment. I was concerned about the 10 feet distance between the houses also, but lo and behold, when I pulled out R1C and looked at the code, it says 5 feet and 5 feet, which would be 10 feet in between the houses. So right now, the way our zone is, those houses can be built 10 feet apart. So that's a no-brainer there. It doesn't change anything.
Again,
That's what
from
I'm
our
saying.
perspective, knowing that and going in, one of the first things that we have to be concerned about tactically is exposures. So we know that we have these buildings with that close proximity, and I was in Covington for 25 years, and they're 10 inches apart sometimes, it seems like.
Yes.
And you're prepared for that. And again, I appreciate their concerns, but if we're ready for that and we know that, we have ways to combat that tactically.
Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Chief. Next up will be Mr. Hahn, who's our Economic Development Director. to address some of the concerns that came up 2 weeks ago at the last meeting, talking about the Kentucky building codes and the development plan.
I agree with you. Yeah, I got it. I was asked to talk about if this were to pass, what are the next steps of going forward with this? And right now, what the Dries Company has submitted was a Stage 1 conceptual plan that everybody, I guess, here has seen. And if that were to pass and the city would agree to amend the zone to the RCD, the R1C with the RCD overlay, the next thing they would do would be apply for or submit their Stage 2 plan. On that Stage 2 plan, and that Stage 2 plan goes to the Planning Development Services, PDS, Planning Commission. And that is reviewed. Normally they submit those in sections. And at that time, they submit, it shows the streets, the thickness of the streets, how the streets are going to be constructed, where the water lines are, where the sewer lines are, and all that sort of thing. Then they build those to those standards from the Planning Commission, approves those and sends us a copy of those. Then they build those streets. Then after that section and streets and everything is completed, then they submit to the Planning Commission and file what's known as a record plat that actually subdivides the property into lots so that you have your lots and then they can build on it. And at that time is when they come and deal directly with the city with submitting an application for a building and zoning permit. From the zoning end is when we would check each individual lot, site plan, and the building plans, because I understand there's a development plan agreement that's been proposed that has different conditions on it. I've heard things from outside finishes of buildings, the landscaping, all of those things. When those things are submitted, that's when they're reviewed by the zoning, Mr. Stewart, who reviews those and makes sure that those are in compliance with what council passes in that development plan and development plan agreement. From the building code end, everybody in Kentucky follows the Kentucky Building Code, and they're inspected with 6 separate inspections, from starting with the footer and the foundation and the framing and insulation and all the way through the final inspection. And no certificate of occupancy is issued until it is in compliance with all of those things. Your development plan agreement and that sort of thing is the way this would be handled. So that's what I was asked to explain, if anyone has any questions.
Anybody have any questions on the building codes? So every house that's built has to follow Kentucky building codes,
Yes,
correct?
that's correct.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
The other topic that was brought up are the school concerns. Just so, you know, we all have talked about this, there is going to be an impact on schools, just like there is going to be on traffic for this development. Dries' proposal is 157 homes, which is averaging 2.2 homes an acre. In the current zoning, it has got that 4.1 to 7.0 units per net acre. You know, we can debate back and forth how many houses can go on to the acre, but just to kind of, so we understand that there is going to be an impact either way. You know, Dries has said that the 157 homes is geared more towards retirement, which obviously we don't know that for sure. They could have some kids on there. But just to kind of show the differences on the different zoning and what the impacts would be, just wanted to kind of put that up there. If anybody had any questions about zoning for the schools, I believe, I mean, no, okay. Okay. Next would just be for, I guess, the council to talk amongst themselves and discuss this more.
It occurred to me, and I'm sure it occurred to everybody here, all the council members, that this is one of those kind of items where we really haven't had a chance to discuss this. Typically, something like this would come to a committee meeting prior to us voting on it. And so we wanted to kind of open up at this point to have more open discussion, answer any questions, or voice any concerns that you might have at this time. Mrs. Sutcam?
Well, I'm like the chief, fire chief. I really herald these people. It's going to affect them. It's going to affect them drastically, like every development does everywhere. We've got to face the fact that there is no longer pristine land available anymore, like the List property is. I personally drove to Boone County to see the Dreves facility in, I believe it's Meadowwood, back off of 18. Personally, I wouldn't want to live there, but I live right down the street, so I'm 30 seconds from the expressway. But it's beautiful, and that's what they build. They build a beautiful community that anybody would be proud to live in. And traffic is always an issue. It always is. It is now. It always will be. It's just the nature of the beast. And one of the entrances to the Drees property out in Boone County, I know this doesn't affect you, but just to give you a for instance, you have to drive down a one-horse path behind Linneman Funeral Home that's a third of the size of Narrows Road to get back into this development. I could not believe it. And people were coming and going just like it was nothing. And so, you know, I don't think there's really much more that we can say. You guys have expressed your concerns. We've all lost sleep about this, I promise you that. We do not take these decisions lightly because it affects you, it affects us, but we have to do what is best for the city of Erlanger. That's why we're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, Mrs. Kyle. There you go.
Well, I have to reiterate what Patty said. I mean, when you're in this position, you have to take in consideration not a certain amount of citizens. You have to take the whole big picture of Erlanger. And that's what we have to do. I mean, we can't just divide ourselves into little groups and say, okay, we're going to vote this way or that way. You have to take what's best for all of Erlanger. There are a lot of people that really support this effort. I know the List family certainly does. They've been caretakers of that land for all these years. I promised their daddy when I first got on this commission that I would not take his land by eminent domain, God love him. But I mean, it's time. Development's coming. We can't stop it. And like I said, I went and got our zoning for this property that already exists. And it's not a whole lot different. One of the big differences is going to be the townhomes. And I think there's a market for that now. Drees is smart. He knows there's a market. He's not going to build something that there's not a market for. There are a lot of retired people that would love to move into a townhome. I taught with a lot of teachers who were single owners of townhomes or condos. You have a lot of career people that would just rather have a townhome. They don't want to be bothered with cutting grass and taking care of the outside of the home. So, I mean, the townhomes serve a good purpose right now. And I see nothing wrong with them. If you look at the ones that are out there now, they're beautiful. And Drees does a good job. He built our house. We're in the very first subdivision. We're old. We're in Fairwood Hills. So, but, you know, when I look at this, and like I said, the minimum requirements between the houses for RC1 is 10 feet. And that's exactly what, you know, he's not saying all of them are going to be that like that, but that's the minimum. And so we're not changing that. And in fact, as far as I'm concerned, traffic is going to be a problem no matter what we build. But I think with the townhomes in the cluster, you're going to have less traffic because typically the townhomes are, like I said, single people, career people, retired people. And we have a market for that now. A lot of people are busy. They don't have time to do that. So I feel very comfortable in letting Dries develop this. They've always been, I know they've made mistakes in the past. We know that. And I don't think they're going to do that again. They want to do good. And they've always been very generous in donating the land. They're going to leave 40 acres of this in open space. And that shows me good stewardship right there. You know, if the land's too steep, you don't want to build on it. Some other builder could come in there and do it. You don't know. And so I think the way he's got this developed with the pictures and the willingness to work with the neighbors, with the trees, I think it's a situation that we would be silly not to vote in his favor. So just wanted to let you know what I'm thinking. But like Patty said, it's very difficult because we know there are a lot of people that don't like it. But on the other hand, we got to go with the majority.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Pitts?
I prepared a statement to read tonight, but I kind of want to do it after the residents speak first.
Okay.
And maybe can we have more discussion then?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. Mr. Cahill?
So when discussing this, what are our options if we go one way or the other and this traffic does come? What are our options with this road? And that's a question I think that's been asked. And we have the traffic study here, but what can we do to help alleviate some of that?
It's a good question. I don't know that we have an answer right off. You know, of course, the traffic study is going to identify things right now, and it's my understanding that Dries would plan to take some part of that at this point. So whether it's putting in stop signs, speed limits, you know, addressing things like that. I don't know if there would, you know, possibly even a turn lane that could go into the, I don't know if that would be, but down the road, yeah, I mean, we're going to have more traffic on Narrows, and it's something that we have to think about and something that we have to anticipate. And that would be, you know, my personal thought would be that we'll have to start to plan for the resurfacing and maybe the improvement that could include widening Narrows Road. It may not, but we have to start to anticipate that now and have to start to save for that.
And I agree with that. And that's, you know, I think one of the concerns too that we need to start looking at in the future, no matter how this goes, is also those mailboxes. You know, that's a big, you know, it's a big thing right now. So and you know, I think there's 10 or 12 that are all 9, yeah. So that's something we need to consider. So we need to, I just want to make sure we start thinking about this because, you know, as is said, this is zoned. This is going to be sold. There are going to be homes there. Tonight, you know, we're going to talk about what that's going to be, but we need to start planning for that future, you know, or at least preparing for that future for whoever.
Tom, I've already reached out to the manager. You remember her name? Renee? Lisa? Whoever the postmaster is for Erlanger. Talked to her last week about it. She's going to be meeting with the postman out there and figure out a plan of how we can do it. Because I explained to them the mailboxes being on the other side, how we can possibly move them, and it's going to be an issue for development either way. So you know, I kind of played both, told them the kind of the positives for both of us that they don't want to have to keep messing with moving some mailboxes. So I'm expecting to get, you know, word back from her in the next month or so.
I think that's a great start. I mean, that's proactive, and I think that's what we need to be in this situation. So.
All right, any others?
I want to say something. I
Sure.
want to do what Corinne's doing. I want to save my questions until everybody else has
Okay,
had their say.
sure. Mr. Nicely, I saw you turned on your microphone. Is it because you wanted to speak?
Yes, it did.
All right. Please feel free.
Well, with mail, I think that should be up to the mail department, government, whatever they want to do. And as far as the traffic on the road, you can't penalize the people because they're gonna build houses on it. I mean, it's gonna be built one way or the other, and I don't see how you're gonna come along and penalize the people with the farm because it's gonna be more traffic. What if they've been the first one to build?
Right.
So like that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? All right.
I do have some, Tom, you had brought up the traffic. Is Mr. Bogart in today? Oh, Ed is, okay. So Public Works Director Rick Bogart did contact the state, yes. Mr. McKinley, who's the branch manager engineering support for District 6, to look at the intersection at Narrows and Richardson and at Brightleaf and Turkeyfoot. They went out and did a study, what was this, on February, well, they concluded on February 2nd. They said this time they don't see, there's no need for any kind of addition stoplights or anything at this time, but they did mention that once things change there, if there are some development, that they'll be happy to come out. I mean, they did this within a week. They were very accommodating to kind of do the research where they count cars and look at the traffic. So I've got the email here. I don't believe I forwarded it to council, but I can, just kind of explaining what they did and what their recommendations are at this time.
I really appreciate that. I think it's good to know that we're getting ahead of this game a little bit, so.
All right. With that, I guess I'd like to open it up to Dries briefly and see if there is anything that you wanted to comment on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Thanks for having us back again. I just wanted to go over, our intent to agree with all the conditions that have been set forth. I'll just summarize a few things. From our last meeting, we talked about the increased width on the lots that were along Street A.
Mr. Taylor, for some reason, could you try angling that? Yeah.
I'm sorry. So the first item that I brought up as far as the conditions go were the increased size and the width of the lots along Street A, and the addition of the exhibit showing the buffering along Narrows Road and the neighbors to the west. So we intend to proceed with those as we get to our Stage 2 plan. The architectural guidelines that were set forth include materials on the front that would be stone, masonry, or hardy siding. I did talk a little bit with Matthew about that, and we would probably have most of our elevations have some masonry. We're doing a lot of styles now that have sort of a water table below the windows. It would be stone or brick and siding above that. So don't anticipate having any full siding homes as far as the front goes. We discussed the connection to Mesa Drive only in the sense of a pedestrian connection that would be a sidewalk. The grade, as I've explained in the past, is just too difficult to get the correct curvatures and geometry to connect our street with Mesa Drive. So we're intending to seek a waiver on that at the subdivision approval level. And then number 5 is the traffic, and that has continued to be a question. We've heard a little bit about it tonight. I'm sure the residents may have more to contribute to that. With the timeline that we've been on, we have not completed our traffic study. That is a requirement of the Stage 2 plan, which we're obviously not at that point yet. I'm not a traffic engineer, nor do I claim to be, but a little bit about how that process works is they factor in the conditions today, obviously, at all the intersections that would be impacted by this community, and then they look at the build-out of the community. So at the additional 157 homes, what does the traffic look like then? So it's not a just today type thing. With the traffic numbers that were shown, roughly 4,500 cars a day, in my experience, this is not a technical comment, but that is not a volume that would lend itself to street widenings where you're talking about 3 lanes, 2 with a suicide turn lane or anything. So at this point, you know, we're waiting, we've engaged a traffic engineer. When we get those recommendations back, we'll be reviewing those, comply with any of the recommendations, whether it be decel lanes or stop signs or that type of thing. And then the final point was the density. That is something we would lock in at the 157 homes. And, you know, a lot of the things we're talking about in these conditions, as well as in the plan, will be drafted into the developer's agreement, which will be a legal binding document between the Dries Company and the city, which gives, you know, everyone here security in what you're approving, essentially. So that's really all I have tonight. I think there's a lot of things that have been presented I plan to address, but you know, the final thing with the fire code, you know, all that's basically regulated by the International Residential Code, which then comes down to the state codes, and all of the structures that we design have fire ratings for that 10-foot separation. You know, if we were to go smaller, you start to have different building designs and assemblies, but everything we do meets the fire code. So just add that. Appreciate your time and your consideration this evening.
Okay.
If you have any more questions, let me know.
I actually have a
Thank you,
couple.
Mr. Taylor. Go ahead.
Can you
Blankenship.
tell me a couple things? You probably covered this before, but I just want to help my memory here. If this is approved from the beginning until the end, how long will it take to develop this property?
Our build-out is in the 7 to 8 year range.
And what is the expected price range of the homes?
I don't have my slides. Actually, I do have them. Reference. The townhome prices begin at $254. That's a base price, and the patio homes begin at $260.
Great, thank you. I knew you said, I just couldn't remember the numbers. Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
What is the difference then between a townhouse and a patio home? I know you probably said that before, but could you, like, put it in a couple
I'd be happy to explain that. The townhomes are attached, so you could have anywhere from a 2 to a 6 unit home, and those are separated by a firewall. And the maintenance on those buildings is basically everything outside. So the roofs, the exterior, the lawns are all maintained, and they have a separate homeowner association fee than the patio homes. So it's in addition to your standard common area fee.
So a patio home does not have a homeowner association fee?
It does. So you would have a master association, try not to make this too complicated, that everyone would contribute to, townhomes and patio homes, that would take care of all the grounds, the trails, the landscaping, walkways, that type of thing. So it'd be sort of let's say it was $500 for the HOA fee. Everybody contributes to that. And then on top of that, there would be an additional fee for the townhome units that takes care of the exterior maintenance of the buildings. And if you own a patio home, you are responsible for whatever your exterior materials are on your roof, but your lawn and snow pushing is provided.
Okay, so on the patio home, the things that are provided are basically stuff that can't be moved. The grass can't be moved, the garbage cans. Is the garbage in with the homeowner
Garbage
association?
is the homeowner's responsibility.
Okay.
So just be snow pushing, trimming the shrubs, mulching, and lawn maintenance.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Mrs.
Yes, ma'am.
Pitts.
A friend of mine, I'm a runner, and I was almost hit by a car on that curve between the firehouse and Brightleaf, or between the firehouse and Mesa. A friend of mine who's also a runner was also almost hit by a car there, and my daughter's also been run off the road there. Is that stop sign going to be right at that curve? Do you know?
The stop sign, if that intersection on the western entrance would align with Country Drive, that's where that would be.
Okay.
I think the bend basically starts from there and goes around the corner. And one of the things we've looked at with our engineer is the sight distance there to make sure that if you're at any of those intersections that you can see safely cars coming, we would make sure that we do not plant any buffer landscaping in that area, and that we also grade, so that you have a clear sight line.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Cahill?
So, no dumpsters, the off-street parking is provided in the townhome area, right?
Correct.
And so there's not like a small parking lot or anything for extra cars?
No, we handle overflow or guest parking, usually in like 5 to 7 space pads off the main street. Try to break them up so you don't get a parking lot feel. And then everyone has an individual dumpster. So there's no common dumpster enclosure or anything like that. And then there's regulations in the HOA that you need to keep those stored inside. People don't, leave them out. You can be cited, I guess, as
So is it a dumpster or a garbage can?
I'm using the wrong term. Rumpke has those big
Gotcha.
bins. It's almost a dumpster size, but it's a garbage can.
Any other questions for Mr. Taylor? All right,
Thank you.
All right, we'll open it up to public comments, questions, concerns. All right, the first person we have on the list is Kimberly Needham. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. I want to start by saying thank you. I know a lot of you have spent sleepless nights, I have no doubt. And I want to thank Dries. We've actually personally talked with them. And really, I just want to say the couple things that have helped us, we've done a lot of talking. And I have a young child who, actually we have 3 young adults in our family now that are all like, well, when you all leave, this is ours, right? So they've got a little play in it, and they want to say. The first thing is the stop signs, and I know he brought it up earlier. If that can be a 4-way stop and that stop sign is there, I think that gives me a lot of peace. That curve is bad, and then I know they said there's only been 2 accidents on that road. I've lived there now for over 10 years, and I know of a 3rd one that just happened last year, and it probably was not reported because it was taken care of the landowner, and he actually came around the curve coming from Mesa and went through the gentleman's back fence. So he lives right there on the corner of Country, and it was wet and it's slick, and he just went through the fence. Luckily, there was nobody in their pool. The pool wasn't affected. The fence was rebuilt, and it was fine. But it was an issue with speed. So I have set out, the speed's a little high. I would love to see the speed limit returned. And again, that's not something Dries can do. That's only something that you all can do. If it could be taken down even to 30, I think it would help. And I do see, and I know we've done studies, and they say the average is 35. But when I sit on my front porch and I watch, and it's not the young ones, folks, it's people our age. I'm watching in the cars. And we're hurried, getting to work, gonna go pick up our kids, gotta get the grandbabies, whatever it is. We're all doing it. So, but I think the speed limit and the stop signs on your all's part and looking into that helps me with this. The mailboxes are probably, it doesn't affect me, to be honest. My mailbox is on my side. But I watch my neighbors cross. I watch the 2. One actually happens to be an officer with you all. And I watch him walk across in the snow and the ice, and it's slick and it's dangerous. And at night, because a lot of times that's when I'm seeing him come after dusk, I barely see him coming across, and I'm sitting still. So if the mailboxes, and I know, again, that's postal, but if you all can kind of push them, I think that helps a lot of us,
Sure.
especially the neighbors on that side.
Okay.
Dries, we've talked with them about the trees, and we're very grateful, and I think that helps with us and my neighbors on the other side of me. It kind of gives us that privacy that we have now, and I think that's really nice, and we've discussed that with them. We've also discussed with them, and this is pretty much just our parcel that it'll affect. We've requested an easement, and I kind of just wanted to put that on record. We are actually on a cistern, or not a cistern, I'm sorry, septic tank. So in thinking of our new neighbors as much as us, once they build, if there's no easement there, there can never ever be sewer. Because once the houses are built and the easement's not there, we can't ever put sewer through. And they have agreed graciously to work with us with that, an easement, either to do half and half or whatever, and we can work on that on a personal level. But, and the other thing that I think made our decision to kind of go with it, I guess, is that you all are promising us that what they're saying they're going to build is all they're going to build. One of our big concerns is, you know, you get in there and you get this, and then it went from, you know, 7 or 10 townhomes to 20 or 30 townhomes, and the 40%. So with knowing that they're not going to change this and it's going to be what they say it is, we can live with that. We've looked at the drawings. It probably actually is better for us because the houses are set further back from us, where in the RC they're going to be set in shorter lots than longer lots. I personally have looked at some when I went over for a meeting. I went over into the new subdivisions and I did look at what's over there, and they do make a nice product, and I'll never ever say they don't. And those are a nice area. So with those conditions and with you all working on the stop signs, the speed limit, and the mailboxes, which are the 3 probably biggest things for me since they've already done the trees, I think that all in all, it's going to be a beautiful neighborhood. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Kenneth Needham. Okay, thank you. Then we've got Mike Chisenhall. Yes, ma'am.
Mike can't be here tonight, so he gave me his questions. So one of them has already been answered, and I'll ask his second one if that's okay.
Okay.
His first question was about the townhouse and the patio homes, what the difference was with the homeowner associations. So the second question is, what assurances do we have that down the road, Dries doesn't change the covenants and remove the restrictions? And I think that was kind of answered also, but if you could answer it again so when he watches this on YouTube, he can see it.
Sure. This might be better answered by either Mr. Gatlin or Dries or Matt.
Yes, so I'm not sure I understand the question. The question is, how do we make sure that the covenants of the homeowners association or the covenants of what they've agreed to do for us? Okay, well, I mean, it's the development plan agreement is a part of the ordinance. Dries has agreed to every contingency that we've put in that written development plan agreement, and that is made a part of the record in Kenton County Clerk's office and runs with the land. So that would be the binding document that the city can use as an enforcement tool if they don't honor their end of the bargain and do what they've discussed and committed to.
I think Mr. Chisenhall is kind of gun shy because he was involved in the first development back there with Dries, and there was a lot of things, and I know that Dries' management has changed right now, and it's not the same people, but it is the same company, and sometimes you kind of, you know, look at that. So I think that's what his concern was, that he just wants to make sure that what happened back then doesn't happen again.
All right, thank you. Thank you for being Mr. Chisenhall's proxy. All right, next we've got Mike. Oh, help me here. Ticolby, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. Appreciate you doing this for a third time. Sorry I missed the last meeting, but I did get to watch it online. That was very helpful. I live on Buck Hill Drive. I'm right at the corner where the new connection is going to be from Doe Ridge. And if, you know, I heard Councilmember Kyle mention that somebody drove through the neighborhoods and they think it feels good. And I asked you to drive through Buck Hill to Doe Ridge and out Ashmont and then drive through Parkside and Lakemont and tell me that it feels the same. It doesn't feel the same to me. We kind of call it Vinylville. It's all the sides are vinyl. That's what we're going to be looking at the back of our homes into that proposed street. All the sides of the houses are vinyl. You know, I know with the lot sizes, it's tough to build brick into those properties, but it's just, to me, it's Vinylville. And I think you mentioned the 5-foot lots. That's not what we have in Buck Hill, Doe Ridge currently. That's another category. That's in a different category. We have 20-foot minimums. There's different categories in R1C. We don't have that category in our subdivision right now. That's a different category. They're not 5-foot setbacks. They're 20. If you're going to change that neighborhood, I would rather you do the same thing you do on Mesa and cut it off at Doe Ridge. I would rather not. I'd rather you put a cul-de-sac in at the end of the 2nd Street and not even connect it to Doe Ridge, because it just, to me, it's going to ruin the feel of our whole neighborhood. It's so much different than driving through, Vinylville. I don't think anybody brought up, and I haven't heard in any of the meetings yet, that, the beautiful spaces and open spaces we're going to have over there. I believe there's going to be a sewer pump station in that. Okay. In between the 2 streets, there's a sewer pump station. Yes. And I don't think that's ever been brought up, that you guys know that that's part of the deal. And we're almost talking about this like it's not going to happen if it's not done this way. Is that where we're at? Okay, but, right. And I have no problem with development. I think it should feel like the rest of the street and the rest of the neighborhoods feel. Once you get this into plan, you understand that it's set. I just ask you all to cross your T's, dot your I's, and make sure that what's in there, what you want in there, is in there before you approve this. Because it's not going to change. It's not going to go back. They're not going to add to it later. So if the brick sides and the brick backs and all that are in there, I'd make sure that you stand by that. Make sure it happens. We all pay for KCPC, Kent County Planning Commission, from every city to do this, and are we still going against what they're going to say? Why do we pay for the Planning Commission? They look at this stuff every day. I do projects for people. I'm in my 10th project for some people, and they still don't know how to read a blueprint and understand the details. So to put 20-minute segments in front of people and understand this whole project, how it's going to look, and then vote on it, I think it's I applaud Mr. Blankenship for stopping the vote last time, because he wanted to understand it. And that's what everybody in council should do. You really need to understand this. It's not, but like I said, I keep hearing like if it happens this way or no way, but I don't think that's the case. I think you have chances to make changes and make it this improvement better before you approve it. Make sure it's what we want. And because you guys obviously work for the city, you work for the people in the city, and I've heard many more against this zoning change than for it. I frankly don't mind the developing part of it. I'm totally for the developing. I just want it done correctly. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Taylor, if you wouldn't mind, you answered a question there, and I just would like to get it on the record. If you could mention that about the sewage.
The western portion of the site, from the creek or the pond up towards Mesa Drive, needs the sewage lift station to handle the flow on that side to pump up and over the hill. But for the amount of units that are there, it's very minimal lift station. It's not the kind you would see down off Turkey Foot Road, the big facility. So it will be down in the common area, kind of tucked lower and out of visibility from the road or other properties, essentially. So.
Okay. Thank you. All right, next on the list, we've got Jeff Nordlow.
My name's Jeff Nordlow. I live at 908 Doe Ridge, and I guess I got everybody's attention. I do like to thank you all for everything you put into this. I've been through this a few times. A lot can change in 78 years, and Basically, if I whispered in Mr. Nicely's ear a sentence, by the time it got over to Mr. Cahill, it can change. And that's basically what happened with Erlanger Lakes and a whole lot of things that can go wrong. When I read the PDS report to the commissioners, page 2 had information that was not factual. And that raised my eyebrows. Why isn't it factual? And I've proved collusion and collaboration before in the past, and those things concern me. So my whole point is there's a lot that can go here, can go on here, that raises your eyebrows. The fact that this is all based on a contingency plan, you know, it's almost as if everybody's being held emotional hostage. Do this or this is going to happen, somebody doesn't benefit. It seems more like money, money, money. That's what drives us. When I first seen the plan, I didn't think it was a bad plan. I didn't like Doe Ridge not being like Doe Ridge. Doe Ridge should be like Doe Ridge is, with big lots and single-family homes. I'm still unsure as far as whether they're going to build single-family homes or patio homes and say it's a single-family home. So those sort of things, you know, kind of, because that's what Dries tried to do over in Lakemont. So I do like to thank everybody for all their input and everything. I want to apologize because I've been through a lot, and I think I have the right to, you know, bring up my concerns and to say everything I've had to say. Like I said, things can go wrong. There's a thing in the zoning ordinance where the zoning administrator can make minor changes. That's open to what's considered a minor change. So anything and everything, all the concessions can disappear, just like that. Even if they're in the development plan agreement, it's a minor change. So I just want to keep everybody on the open, on the honest, integrity. And that just doesn't mean Dries, that means the city of Erlanger and the planning and development services. Because a lot of people make mistakes, maybe honest mistakes, and it changes the plan. Been there, done that, seen that. So just keep up on everything and make sure it gets developed. It looks like it's already going to be developed as this. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to just go ahead and address one thing there as far as the patio home, and from what I've heard and understood from the last few meetings, that's not an industry term, that's not an Erlanger term, that's a Dries term, and that is the style of living. You know, the homeowners association, they call it a patio home when it is a single-family home, and it has the agreement to take care of the outside, the lawn and the landscaping and things like that. That's a Dries term. All right. Next up, we've got Mr. Gary Cook. Okay. Okay, thank you. And then we've got, okay. Come on up.
Two things, just safety. I almost seen a kid get hit down on 3 Help, so I don't want to be silent on this. There is one area where a sidewalk goes up by Deer Chase, and that might become a safety issue because people might be trying to cross there. Because you build a sidewalk, they might go that way to go to the park, and there's no stop sign there. So that I just want to keep that on the radar to look at that when it gets to that point. And if there's any way you can, guys, just build a sidewalk around that dangerous curve. Well, everybody's talking about it, but nobody's taking action. We're just waiting for an accident to happen, and then we'll build the sidewalk.
So you're saying it's the curve is the curve in Narrows Road, and you're saying put a sidewalk on the inside of it, on the same side as the development?
Outside, just, it needs to be done. It's a dangerous area. I've almost hit kids walking along there because, you know, you come around that curve and they walk out on the road trying to dodge those poles and everything like that. And it's just a dangerous area. I mean, we can't wait until it happens before we act.
Okay.
You know, I don't know how much it costs, but.
And
We need to be safe.
if I'm thinking of the right place, on that same side of the street, it's about maybe 3 parcels down, a sidewalk begins,
Yeah, there's probably
right?
about 3 or 4 houses, there's already a sidewalk down there. It wouldn't take that much to finish that sidewalk,
Yeah, okay.
you know? So I think, you know, look into it, at least do the study. Look into it, look at the cost.
Okay.
Don't wait till an accident happens.
Excuse me, can I say something?
Yeah, please.
We have been, the sidewalk's been on the plan for years. The problem is you have to get the property owners to agree with it, and there's 1 or 2 that it really affects their yards, so we need to find a creative way to do it. But trust me, we're going to figure something out because it is dangerous.
All right, thank you. Next up, we've got Tracy Tableman. Did I say that right? From Buck Hill? Okay, there you are.
Just add one other thing.
Sure.
About that sidewalk. It was my understanding that Dries had said they would put money into an escrow for when we eventually put the sidewalk in, that would be a covered charge. Is that correct?
I hadn't heard that.
We discussed that. I don't think we put that in anything written because we would have to acquire all the property and stuff. So, and it would be a minimal expense. I don't think if that's a deal breaker, I don't think that they would be opposed to adding it in there, but it's really not a large expense due to, I think it's only 4 or 5 yards. It was 120 feet, I believe, of sidewalk was what it was when we measured it.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
Hi, my name is Tracy Tebelman. I live at 3952 Buck Hill Drive. And just had a couple points. I think most of this has been covered, but my husband was here at the last city council meeting as I was unable to attend. I was out of town, but we talked about the 3 exits coming out of the new development, but all of them are still going to hit Narrows, which will probably lead us all into Brightleaf because no one really likes going down Narrows down to Richardson because of the way that road is. So that's going to add traffic there. And I know that the Enclave has been a big talk. Everybody's all happy about, they keep talking about how the Enclave is. And I don't know if any of you have seen Turkey Foot, and there's the one model home that your lights go right into it every morning, and you're like, hey, can I have a muffin, cup of coffee? Because you're going to be able to see everything. I don't know who's going to buy that house because they're never going to be able to use those windows because everyone's going to see right into their home. It's like a fishbowl. Ashmont, I wonder how many of the people appreciated what Dries put in there. I called the zoning committee today to find out if they had changed their mind, and their answer was no. We said leave the zoning. They didn't feel like the case was built to change it. So they said, we're going to leave it. I know that there were people on that commission that talked about how Dries, and I know they're under new management, but how they didn't follow the process and it had to go back to the zoning committee and the planning committee, and they had to go back and say, well, now what are we going to do, right? What are we going to do? Because they've already got people that bought those homes that didn't meet the standards. So from my perspective, I just ask that you all take what the zoning and planning commissioners said. They spent the time, they looked at it. I was at that meeting. There were a lot of people that did discussions. I think there are a lot of people that are against it here. We're in that same meeting, and they all voted to say, don't change it. There's not enough justification to change the planning. Just change the zoning, and I just ask that you follow that same direction as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we've also had discussions with the Kenton County Planning Commission, and if you remember at that meeting, the Planning and Development Services their staff had actually, their staff is the ones that we as taxpayers actually pay for. They had recommended to the Kenton County Planning Commission that the development be accepted. And
I asked them today, I called 2 gentlemen, and they said that's not true. It was never changed. It was never changed. They said they were going to have to re-vote on it, that you have to have a public meeting. And I called twice today and got confirmation that they still do not agree that the zoning should happen. It should stay the way it is.
Okay, so it is two different entities, though. The Planning and Development Services staff recommended the development. The Kenton County Planning Commission voted against it. They rejected it. And the main concerns that they had were, they mentioned traffic. Well, they mentioned a host of things that I'm sure I won't remember every one of them right now, but some of the bigger concerns were the lot widths and the buffers and the landscaping and, you know, things to that effect. And a lot of those have been addressed. And come on up, because we need to keep it on public record.
I had the same discussion with my husband brought this up and made it sound like it was re-voted on. And I called today twice, and they said that had not been re-voted on. And had they were going to go back and change their decision, it would have had to have been a public meeting. They would have had to have signs up to say that we are going to rediscuss this. Because I called today because I asked that same question, and they said that decision is in place. They recommend that it not be changed. So if we're saying that it did, I talked to two gentlemen today, and they said it did not change. They'd have to have a public meeting for that to happen. We'd have to go through the whole process again. And they said no, their stance is what they had back in January, which is not to change it.
Okay. Mrs. Tableman, I want to make sure that we understand exactly what you're saying. I think what you're saying is that you think that we should be going back to the Kenton County Planning Commission?
No, I'm saying from everything that was talked about last meeting was that the Zoning and Planning Commission had changed their mind, and that's not true. They have not changed their mind.
Yeah, just to clarify, we've never said that they changed their mind.
Okay, but you're saying some of the concerns that they had. I'm saying if you think those concerns have been addressed, then why don't we go back to the Zoning and Planning Commissioners who spent the time to look at it and say, okay, now this is what they're presenting. Do we agree that we should go back and re-vote on that? And their comment back to me was if that ever happened, they would have to go and have another public hearing, post the signs, not just put it on the internet, not just put it on Facebook, but actually have the signs on the farm like they did a month in advance, where now the early, here it's, you got to get on Facebook, you got to go on the internet and see when you guys are having your meeting. Is it 7? Is it 6:30? Oh, well, it's Friday afternoon. We decide we're going to make it 6:30, right? So my whole thing is I wanted to find out exactly what the zoning committee had decided, and if their comment is we did not change our decision, it was voted down to leave it district the way, or leave it zone the way it is, right?
You're 100% correct.
Okay.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, right?
Yep.
They decided that, and it is up to, then they said it's up to city council to make that decision if they want to change their minds, right? Which is what you guys can do, and it sounds like you've already pretty much decided that. That's unfortunate for all of us that live back there. So if that's the way you go, that's what you do.
Okay. So, yeah, this is what I was beginning to explain. And, so we've had the discussions with Kenton County Planning Commission. If the changes that the modifications that Dries has made, cutting down the number of lots, making some of the lots wider, increasing the width between the houses, or I'm sorry, increasing the width of the lots. Some of these type of items that they've addressed. We've had discussions with the KCPC lawyer, and he said that the changes that have been made have not been substantive enough to come back and go back through the process again.
Why wouldn't that? I mean, if you're saying that, I mean, my whole take, if they're saying that the changes that they've made you feel is enough to convince you all, then why aren't we back at the zoning and planning meeting and let the commissioners decide? Do they feel the same way?
Well, because
I mean,
it's ultimately our choice.
You have this subgroup.
It's still ultimately our choice.
That's true.
Okay.
And it's ultimately our choice to whether or not you get re-voted on the city council.
That's correct, 100%. Okay. Mrs. Tableman was the last person signed up to speak. I would certainly open up the floor if there was anyone that did not get a chance to sign up. Please. If you wouldn't mind just stating your name for the record.
Thank you, Mayor. City Council, Dave Costello, Buck Hill Drive. I think what we're losing the point on, and I've been at all of these meetings, including the KCPC meeting, and the underlying theme at the KCPC meeting was, is this zoning change, is it something that needs to happen? Is it something that, is there something wrong, more importantly, with the current zone? And the answer to that is no. There is nothing wrong with the current zone. I'm not opposed to building. I look forward to the development. I'm out walking my dogs every night. I look forward to new treks to walk my dogs. So I'm not opposed to development. I'm opposed to changing a zone because it could adversely affect my property value. When we put in a vinyl community, that could adversely affect my property value, and I could see a decrease in the value of my home or a position where it doesn't increase the value that it should. And I think there's nothing wrong with the zone as the way it is today, and it should remain the way it is. And the other thing is, too, when we do a traffic study and we compare Nelson Road or Narrows Road to Commonwealth, that's not apples to apples, let's be honest. I mean, that's about as far from apples to apples as we can get, you know? So I don't think that's, that, again, traffic doesn't bother me. It really doesn't. I just think that's an interesting comparison. And the development doesn't bother me, but changing the zone does bother me because there's nothing inappropriate about the way that it is zoned today, and that was the common theme at the KCPC meeting, that there is nothing wrong with the zone that's in place today, and if we're changing it to benefit a seller and a buyer, and I have no issue with either one of those, but if we're changing it to benefit them, that's a problem, and I don't think we should do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify there too, the traffic study was compared to Stevenson, another two-lane road, not Commonwealth. Go ahead.
I just want to let people think about one thing. A lot of comments were made about vinyl homes. If this property remains in this zone, we up here have no say on what gets put there. It could be all vinyl homes. It could be no brick on any homes, and there is nothing we can do about it. Has anybody, I mean, have you guys just at least thought of that aspect of it? At least with this, we have some say on brick wraparound.
Good, thank you. Mrs. Kyle?
I also have a comment to make about what goes in that zone because there's kind of some confusion about the distance between the houses. What I was stating was if you have an open space consideration, that's when you can, and we certainly do, if he's buying 70 acres, and we said 40 acres, I believe, I read that in one of the parts of the agreement, wasn't it 40 acres is going to remain open space? Am I quoting that properly?
I think it may have been 40%.
40%, okay. So, but anyway, and all he would have to do is have 14 acres open space for this to happen. Your minimum lot area is 8,500, minimum side yard width is 5 feet. Now, if you don't have the open space considerations, and maybe that's what this gentleman has here in the other subdivision, I don't know, then your minimum lot size is 12,500, and the side yard width is 20 feet. So it makes a difference. This is what's in our zoning. It's already there. This probably was here before I was even elected as council. The other thing is, too, you have permitted uses, conditional uses, I mean. And I don't know if you all know about that or not, but conditional uses, we have no control over that. It's already zoned. So you could have a cemetery in there, churches, government offices, schools, medical care, hospitals, clinics, sanitariums, convalescent homes, nursing homes, homes for the aged, nursery schools, all kinds of stuff can go in there that we have no control over. And that was the statement I was trying to make. We do have a certain amount of control here, and you can see that the Dries Company has agreed with us that they are going to do the tree line, as the one lady came up here and stated. They're going to be putting in the sidewalks along the one area that faces Narrows Road. It doesn't address the private homes that we want to build a sidewalk on because we can't do that. Those people own that property. You have to get permission from them. But what I wanted to state was, there's a lot of things that can go in here that we can't control. So another developer comes in, they say, hey, I've got the open space consideration. You're still going to have the 5-foot side yard. We have no control over that. That's the way it's zoned. So I just want you to know it's more complicated than it seems, you know? And that's what I spent a lot of time on, looking at this zoning regulations and seeing what we can do. And, you know, you could get somebody in there, like someone said just before, they could build all vinyl houses with no brick on them. There's nothing in this zoning that says they can't. So that's not a valid argument, I don't think. Thank you.
Okay. I prepared a statement, but I wanted to hear what everybody had to say to see if it would affect my statement, and it has not. I was not able to attend the PDS meeting, which is Planning Development Services. They were the ones that approved the zone change. I did attend the KCPC, which is Kenton County Planning Commission, which denied the zone change. When the chair made a motion not to approve the zone change, she stated many reasons, but one of the couple things she stated was the concept looked wonderful on paper and fit well with the Direction 2030 plan. However, she based her decision on mainly one of the things she said was what Dries did in 2010 in Lakemont, along with a lot of resident input that was against this. At that time, I agreed with her, but she or any of them on Planning Commission did not have the time to look further into it as we have. We've had 2 months to go back and forth and talk to Dries and make revisions and compromises and see if this can work. None of us up here are taking this lightly. Most of us have lost a lot of sleep over this. But we've tried to find solutions. I really do not know how most people up here are going to vote. Honestly, I don't. But I will be voting yes to overturn it. I will be voting yes to change the zone, and I'm going to explain why. Although this is a very tough decision for all 12 of us up here, it's even harder for 3 of us because we live right there. We're directly affected by this property. Tom Cahill and I built our homes on Deer Chase 22 years ago when it was brand new. Back then, there was no Lakemont, there was no Doe Ridge, there was no Shearborn. Turkey Foot was 2 lanes. Narrows Road was a windy death hill. Nelson wasn't much better, and it had a sign at the end that says trespassers will be shot on sight. I'm not lying. The section of Narrows and Richardson, there was a house on the left on this little hill. It was a little shack, and you couldn't see at all to turn on that road, and there were people just playing with their guns all the time, just shooting at everything. So anyway, we've witnessed a lot of changes over 22 years. So we empathize with all your concerns, and that's why we've listened, that's why we've lost sleep, because this affects us, it affects our neighbors, it affects our friends. I went to Harmony, which is their development out in Boone County. I went to tour a home. I didn't tell them I was on council, and I wanted to tour a townhome, but she said, they're sold out, but I'll go ahead and take you through it. She said, I hope we can get this land in Kenton County because we have a waiting list. The homes were beautiful, I agree. I didn't like the smaller, narrow lots, but the homes on the inside were beautiful. I've talked to some people over on Arcadia that live in Alexandria. Many are snowbirds. They travel some in the summer, some in the winter, and they like the fact that their land, everything's taken care of. They can just pick up and go. I actually have friends that are building out there also for the same reason. When I thought about that, I said, well, that makes sense. There are going to be more retired people that are snowbirds that are going to drive less traffic, and the one nice thing about that is less teenage drivers. There will be 42% green space. I think that's huge. I'm thrilled about that. That's almost half the property. And it's not just going to be green space. They're going to make it look nice. Dries has listened and worked with us and you all. They've listened to your suggestions and our suggestions, and they've actually worked on some of them. They will have to sign an agreement that holds them accountable to each home being built, and there will never be more than 11 townhomes and never more than 113 patio homes on this 70 acres. Some people have tossed around, we don't care, we're just trying to get more tax dollars. Actually, there's very little difference on the price of the home and how much tax dollars the city gets. We get most of our revenue from businesses more than residential. We know traffic's an issue, but it's going to be an issue either way. Like Matt Kramer said before, we tried to get the state to change Brightleaf Boulevard, where the center lane you can turn right or left. They said even though it did back up a little bit, it didn't quite meet the qualifications, but maybe in a year or two when we ask them to do it again, they will. Dries also agreed to abide by any issues on the Phase 2 traffic study. I think that's huge. Bottom line is none of us want to see this farm go, but homes will be homes and they will be built one way or another. The List family has a right to sell, and if we change the zone, we at least have some say on this development. If not, patio homes can still be built, and we have no say on how many, how much they will cost, or how much vinyl or brick they have, or how many roads they put in. I've been contacted by many people who aren't thrilled about this, but still want us to do it because they at least know what they're getting. For me personally, I feel it's the right decision as a city as a whole, as well as a homeowner that's directly impacted by this decision. And I just wanted people to understand where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Pitts. Mr. Nicely?
We haven't had too much discussion. What does the sanitation water department, is that going to handle the extra flow?
I guess I could let Mr. Taylor explain that.
I'm sorry, could you restate the question? It was about the sanitation flow?
And the
Yeah,
water,
yes,
size of the water
the
lines.
sanitation and the water. We haven't had them up discuss it, and I haven't had it, heard too much about it.
We've had our engineers validate that information during our due diligence to make sure that there's flow capacity in the sewer lines.
Capacity.
And the water as well. So there's sufficient water pressure in the line that's there. I mean, we'll ultimately do tests and things, but the size of it is correct and can serve that size community.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns, statements? Mrs. Skidmore, you had mentioned that. Were you talking about Mr. Chisenhall's comment when you said you wanted to speak later? Okay. Okay, okay, thank you. Yes. Any others? I see a couple hands in the audience. Come on up. Got two. Mrs. Needham.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify. I thought in the last meeting that they had made a change over on Bunk Hill that the lot sizes were going to be the larger sizes, but they were not going to change the ones on our property. Is that still true? I thought they were going to go more with the size that Bunk Hill currently is on that side of the road. I mean, that's what I had noted. And I don't know if that helps. I mean,
Yeah, it's the street A, which is labeled on their plans on the east side.
which connects to Bunk Hill Drive, correct?
Correct. That one's going to have I believe it's 70-foot minimum or 65-foot minimum. On the right, I think on the east side of the street, it's going to be 70. On the west side, 65. Ben, is that correct?
But they were more the single-type homes than the paddle
60,
homes.
okay, correct.
Okay.
But no, you're correct. On the west side of the development, it would be
So they were going to be more
50.
similar to the Bunk Hill feel than, as you all call, the patio homes over on our side. But they have the larger lots?
Yes, the lot
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that, because I was telling somebody who asked me, I wanted to make sure I gave her the correct information. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Blair? If you wouldn't mind just stating your name?
Yeah, I'm Josh Blair. I live at 3976 Wood Chase, about a quarter mile from the property. And I got here a little late. I was watching this on YouTube, so I heard all the comments. And I think and I had some time to reflect on this because I was at the last meeting that, and I agree with what you all were saying. It's not about vinyl siding. It's not about property values, things like that. It's not what you're here for. Like, as Ms. Kyle said, you're here to do what's best for the city of Erlanger. So as somebody mentioned before, that, if you just do nothing, if you just don't approve the zoning change, the List family gets their millions, Dries gets their millions, the city of Erlanger gets all their tax revenue. Everything's fine. Everything's great. There's no problems with that. If you do approve the zoning change, with all the associated problems that we've discussed and you've all discussed that I won't reiterate, the city of Erlanger, if what, I forget who said it, if the amount of tax revenue the city of Erlanger gets is negligible, then I don't understand what the benefit is to the city of Erlanger, which is who you're here to serve. To me, the zoning change is all about greed. It's all about more money for Dries, and I think that approving the zoning change is very short-sighted, because eventually when we do have to expand the road and add turn lanes and there's traffic accidents and things like that, who pays for all that? Us, the taxpayers. And so I think that this zoning change is, again, about greed. I think it is overreaching, and I think, like in the character Icarus from mythology, where he's flies too close to the sun and it melts his wings. I think that's what this proposal does. It's too much, and we're looking we're just too excited about whatever these fancy PowerPoints and things like that, and it's going to end up ultimately hurting us and humbling us and be a mistake. So thank you.
All right, thank you. As it's been spoken multiple times this evening, we certainly aren't taking this lightly, and we are trying to take everything into consideration. And, at one point, Wood Chase wasn't a subdivision either. I mean, we have to realize that this is kind of the natural progression of a city. And, it's all, we're all part of the same city, and it's growing. So, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Blair. Any other comments? Go ahead.
I have to answer, it's not about money, believe me. If it were about money, that would be easy. More money, less money. It's not about money. It's about what is best. And to me, I feel better if I have some control on what goes in there, because otherwise you have no control. If you don't take this, you could get vinyl houses swished together and no shrubbery or anything like that, no designs. So, I mean, that's what I'm thinking of. What is best for Erlanger? A community that we have control over, or just let the wind take it, get vinyl houses in there, all squished together, be ugly to look at every day as you go to and from work and school? That's what I'm thinking of. I'm not thinking about the money. I'm sorry. That offends me when people say that. Sorry.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Kyle.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Nicely?
I do have something to say to all the people here. This is a hard job. Make a decision. Some people's not going to be happy. I don't like being here, but it's my duty, and I've got to go with what I think is best. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right, not seeing any other comments or people that want to discuss this any further, we'll move on in the agenda to the legislation. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. All right, so we're looking for a motion, and I know last time we put this into the zoning Building and Zoning.
Approved, so there should be a motion to take it off the table first. That needs a motion and a second and a vote.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Blankenship, a second by Mr. Montgomery to take it off the table. All right. Any discussion? You have something to discuss? Okay, I think we've got the motion and the second. Any other? Sure. Okay, we'll try to talk more directly into the mic. Absolutely. It's important to us as well. Thank you. Thanks for speaking up. All right, so we've got a motion and a second to take, Mr. Wickman, would you mind?
To take from the table the motion to amend the zoning text in conformity with the proposal of the Dries Company as amended.
Okay, so this is a motion to take it off the table. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, motion carried. And then now we make another motion.
Need a motion.
Mr. Burke?
Make a motion. The motion has been taken off the table, so it is now, it's already been made, it's already been seconded. So now it's time for discussion on that motion to accept the Dries proposal and override the recommendation of the Planning Commission. And after any discussion, if there is any additional discussion, then there should be a vote to
First reading.
to give first reading to the ordinance that's on the agenda.
All right, is a council member prepared to make that motion?
I think motion was already made.
Motion's already made. The
It's already
question
been-
is
it's already
there
been
any
made.
discussion on the
Okay.
motion?
Okay, not to over-confuse this, but can we, is that the motion? I mean, I know you described it, but can we have the actual motion? I know some of the people in the audience may not have been here 2 weeks ago. Yeah, we're beyond the point of public comment. Yeah, we'll read it here in just a second. Mr. Wickman, if you wouldn't mind speaking directly into that mic.
Yes, sir. The motion was to, in regard to the zoning map amendment of the List Farm as proposed by the Dries Company, the motion of the committee recommendation is to override that unfavorable recommendation of the Planning Commission and proceed with that zoning map amendment, but with some restrictions and limitations on the development, use, and construction of the List Farm. The basis of the override is a finding from the evidence and the record of the commission that the proposed amendment is generally in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan and is appropriate. The development, improvement, use, and construction on the List Farm shall be restricted to that described in the List Property Stage 1 Concept Plan dated February 5th, 2018, as supplemented by both the conditions identified in correspondence from Mr. Taylor dated February 5th, 2018, and described by him, and then the conditions and other recommendations of the Staff Commission in their report and recommendation dated December 27th, 2017. Those restrictions and limitations on the development, improvement, use, and construction on the List Farm shall be memorialized in a development plan agreement that shall be signed by on behalf of the City of Erlanger, the Dries Company, and the owners of the List Farm, and recorded in the office of the Kenton County Clerk of Independence, Kentucky. That report was made by Councilman, what's your name?
Mr. Burke.
I get called a lot of stuff. And he made that in the form of a motion, That motion was seconded, and again, it was, there was a motion to place it on the table. That motion is, the current status of that motion is it's ready for discussion because there was a motion and to take that motion off the table, that motion passed. So the motion is now to approve these, override the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve the zoning map amendment proposed by the Dries Company. And now that should be open for discussion by the council. If there is no further discussion, it can be,
We'll move into a roll call vote.
right.
All right, is there any further discussion among council?
Corinne?
Mrs. Pitts?
So when we do the roll call vote, yes means we want to overturn. Is that how it works? Okay.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you for that clarification. Seeing no other comments?
It's a council.
No more.
Okay, yes, to clarify, a vote for yes would be to reject the recommendation of the Kenton County Planning Commission and to move forward with the proposed Dries development plan. Yes, you're welcome. All right, seeing no other comments, Mr. Nicely?
Is the council going to have a special meeting to just private to discuss this?
No,
No, we're done. This is going to be the
This
first
is the
reading.
special
No.
meeting.
Never, you can't do that.
Never.
No.
Okay.
Roll
Seeing no
call.
other comments, we'll ask Mrs. Hoffman for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fetty?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Blankenship? Mr. Skidmore? Ms. Sudkamp?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Cahill?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Skidmore?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Kyle?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Burke?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Nicely?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Cahill?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Pitts?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, the motion carried. Ready for our first reading?
Yes, thank you. It's an ordinance of the City of Erlanger in Kenton County, Kentucky, amending the zoning map of the Erlanger zoning ordinance to reclassify the List Farm on that map from the R1C zone to the R1C parenthesis RCD zone with an agreed development plan. By summary, the ordinance overrides the recommendation of the Planning Commission on the basis of the evidence in the record of the Planning Commission that the proposed development is in agreement with their comprehensive plan and that the proposed zoning is appropriate. And the ordinance then provides for an amendment of the zoning map from the R1C zone to the R1C parenthesis RCD zone with an approved development plan.
All right, we'll ask Mrs. Hoffman to please note the first reading of the ordinance. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Burke, second by Mr. Blankenship. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carried. Meeting adjourned. We will now move into a council committee meeting. You're welcome to stay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Oh, yay, thanks, honey.
Sure.
So I'm already done.
We're not going to do future funeral, I mean, talk to Mr. Burke. It works. All right.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started in 1 minute.
I don't know. That's my,
I forgot the stickers I was going to do.
I know.
Sorry. I'll have them on my next meeting.
What'd you just do? You hit another light?
Oh, it doesn't.
Doesn't do anything?
It's the channel.
Channels?
You can have multiple.
Okay. All right, I know we've got a couple council members out, but we'll go ahead and get started. I know everybody's funneling back in here. Go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the council committee meeting, February 20th, 2018. The first item on the agenda. Okay. Okay, we'll start with the Codes, Building, and Zoning, Mr. Burke, Mr. Nicely. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and turn on the mic. Yeah.
On the first one here, the map amendment for the future funeral home, we're going to table that. Mr. Marcus Carey is going to come to the next meeting and would like to talk to us about it.
At
Okay.
the next committee meeting?
We're going to, at the
Next
council meeting?
regular
It'll be the council meeting.
Council meeting. So next, yeah. All right, the second thing we have is that Vioxx Drive concrete plant that brought up last week. I guess we just want to make sure if everybody's, there's got to be a map amendment on that too, don't it, Dave? Push your button.
Yes, sir. I got it. Basically, I sent that out, that PowerPoint presentation that I got from those folks. They're very interested. And I guess the reason that I asked Mr. Burke to call the meeting for tonight was just to get a feel from council to see if you're in favor of them moving forward, because there's a lot of moving parts to this. As you can see, this map that Matt put up there, this down here is the old concrete plant that the city owns. This property from here to the interstate is property that is owned by a group of people. So they would have to acquire both properties. For them to get our property, we would have to declare our property surplus, so they could bid on it and, or someone else could bid on it. So then if they wouldn't get it, then, you know, that's just what it's just kind of a mixed up thing. Also, it's in two separate zones, these properties, so that there would have to be either a zone change or a map amendment or a text amendment adding these uses to the list of permitted uses. And there would have to be some sort of zoning change to occur. So before these folks are interested in building what I sent to you, but they wanted to know that if they didn't want to go through all those processes of that, if they didn't know that they were going to, if the city wasn't in favor of their project. Do you have that on there?
Yeah, we've got it on there.
Okay.
That was just, before we flipped off there, does everybody understand what area we're referring to? It kind of
Yeah.
angles there. Okay, I just wanted to.
And those lines could change.
Right, that was just the general
Depending on
area.
the property that they need, but that's the basic area.
While she's getting this up, if you don't mind, Dave and I have talked about this. The closest golf attraction like this is up in Westchester Township. I did contact.
Union Center.
Union.
Union Center?
Union Center.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
It's in Westchester
In
Township.
Westchester, yeah.
I talked to the city administrator up there just to see if there was any kind of negative or positive impacts. He said there were no negative impacts to it. Actually, it's brought a lot more people into the area. So, again, that's just kind of the research we did ahead of time, just so we can kind of see if there's anything that we're not paying attention to that might be a negative.
I went to one of these facilities in Florida. Oh my gosh, what fun.
They're nice, it's nice up there.
Big time fun. My question first and foremost would be, how is this going to affect the development?
I contacted the Nair folks that's developing Showcase Cinema, and they don't have a problem at all with it going there. They did say, because I thought that they may be interested in the concrete plant property as well. They said right now that they don't have any plans, but if it, and I explained to them how we have to sell the property, they said we might bid on it. So, yeah.
If they don't have a problem with it, I don't either. Yeah, yeah, that,
I think Ms. Fetty, you have, oh, okay. Oh, okay.
This certainly would be a destination. I mean, it certainly would be something that people would, I mean, just like the one in Westchester, I mean, it's definitely a landmark.
The one up in Westchester is called Top Golf. It's a little different. This is even a little more advanced than that. These balls have a chip in them that tell you how far they go, how close, you know, it's a fun thing. If anybody's, I've been up to the Westchester one a couple times being a golfer, and it's, you know, it's hitting golf balls, eating a cheeseburger, and drinking a cold beer is a lot of fun.
David, I have a question about the property, buying of the property. Like, if we would surplus ours and they would buy it, but then they couldn't buy the other property, that would be a problem, wouldn't it?
That would be a problem. They'd probably have to walk away because they wouldn't have enough property to do what they need. You know, they need about 14 to 15 acres. They need, I forget how many, in this somewhere it tells you how many feet they need.
Right.
So they would need.
But the problem would be on theirs. They'd have to purchase ours first and then purchase the other ones. And they couldn't purchase the other ones, they would own ours.
Yeah.
So it would, I mean, the risk is on them. What we would be doing is putting up for, if you guys choose to, put it up for surplus, and it gets bid on. So Nair may bid on it, they may bid on it, we may have 3 other bids on that property. And then the bids would be opened and you would choose whose development plan you think would be best for that area.
Oh, okay.
Not necessarily the highest price.
Right.
It's just whatever you think the best for that area. Correct. So this development they do, I think it's a 2-level, is what they're
I
going
believe
for.
what they're showing is a 2-level.
It's going to have a full bar, full restaurant there. conference rooms.
Conference rooms.
Things to have businesses come in and do, conferences and stuff and parties.
And these folks are willing to come in and address you all and answer any questions directly. I just felt that if you all didn't feel like you wanted to go through that process,
Have our Christmas party there,
There you go, yeah, someplace in Erlanger.
Could this be the senior center?
Don't say that.
Is everybody good for this, or?
Yes.
All right, everybody seems good, Dave.
I can't hear
Okay.
everything.
how do you want to proceed next? Do you want to meet these folks? Do you want me just to say that you all are in favor and let them go ahead and start that process, and then we could declare the property as surplus?
Yeah.
I would think that would be the next logical step, is to go ahead and declare it surplus.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll put that on the agenda for council meeting to declare it surplus. And again, even though we're declaring surplus, doesn't mean we have to do anything with it right now. So I mean, if
Okay.
we, some reason decide down the road that we don't want to do this, we still have a little bit of time. But they're pretty eager to get the
Yeah.
ball rolling right now,
Yeah.
so.
So I will just then let them know that that's what we're going to do, and they can proceed with their, and then we'll have to also then look at the zoning amendments on how we want to handle that.
Yep.
All right,
Thank you, Dave.
thank you.
And then if we had Turfway, a Racino,
It's coming.
we would have,
It's coming.
I hope.
Should we try to annex that?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Get to work.
Yeah?
Okay, then moving on, we've got the Finance, Business, and Development, Mr. Blankenship, Mr. Montgomery. I see Mr. Chamberlain here.
Mr. Chamberlain's looming.
Van Gorder, Walker.
Mr. Chamberlain wants to be home by 9, right, Mr. Chamberlain?
There, got it.
Come on in. Welcome.
Eventually, I'll figure this thing out.
Mr. Bodie, did you want to say
Yeah,
anything first?
Steve?
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. I was so surprised to see a huge crowd here for the audit presentation. I was so excited, and it just never turns out. I'm always disappointed. My name's John Chamberlain. I'm a CPA and partner at Van Gorder, Walker and Company here in Erlanger, and I appreciate the opportunity to work with your friendly city and do your audit for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017. I'd want to start by thanking Steve. He took really good care of us. Mark was the city administrator when we were here, actually, but they took real good care of us, got us everything we need. Sherry, I won't leave you out. And took real good care of us, made sure we had everything that we asked for. And you guys are lucky to have someone, and I'll get into this in the presentation in a moment, that Steve is really growing well into this position, and I gave him a lot of laud and honor in the Finance Committee. So he's doing a fine job. You should have two things from me. You should have a copy of the financial statements, or you had that in your packet. Hopefully you brought those. I will go through those a little bit. And then we have the slide presentation. We'll start with the slide presentation. If you go to the second slide, that's the auditor's opinion, and that's what we call an unmodified opinion. That's the highest opinion that we give, that your financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects as of June 30th, 2017. The next slide shows that we, as a part of our audit, part of a Yellow Book audit, we do review your internal controls. We look for segregation issues in internal controls. And you do have proper controls so that there are no segregation of duties issues, no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal controls that we're required to report. You also, as a part of a Yellow Book audit, we do review compliance with all of your debt issues, compliance with KRS under KRS 91A. And so we do look at a lot of compliance issues with the city as well, and there's no non-compliance issues to report. The next slide addresses the governance letter. I did meet with Finance Committee last week and provided them with a governance letter, and I'm sure they would provide you with one if If you'd like to see one, Steve has them. But we made two unplanned audit adjustments. One was to recognize some funds, and one was just to move some stuff around. So that's really good in a city this size, just to make two audit adjustments. And then we made one planned audit adjustment. We do this every year where we add the net pension liability to your statement of net assets. We issued no management comments this year. This kind of hurts my feelings a little bit because I like to issue management comments when I go do an audit, but I really didn't see anything that rose. We mentioned a few things to Steve, but really nothing that rises to the level of a comment. So again, that's a really good attaboy for Steve. And also, the city issues a consolidated annual financial report every year to the Government Finance Officers Association. And as you see, this report has been issued, has been sent into the GFOA for an achievement in excellence, or for excellence in financial reporting, and you've gotten that the last several years, so you should be very proud. The next slide is just an assets, unrestricted cash, and investments comparison. And over the last several years, and you can see there that the blue bar is just your total assets, the green is your unrestricted cash, and the purple is investments. We like to use a 3-month, 1 quarter, 3 months cash on hand rule of thumb that says 3 months of your operating expenses on hand at June 30th. For the city of Erlanger, that'd be about $4.4 million. You've got about $10.5 million in unrestricted and $4.2 in relatively liquid investments. So you've got just over 10 months of cash available if you got no other revenues in the door. So, so you're in a very solid cash position, very good position, increased over the prior year. Things are looking very well there. The next slide is a debt comparison slide. The yellow are your current fund liabilities. The one in the middle, that's actually orange, is your current liabilities, and you see your current fund liabilities, just a slight increase over last year, but very stable over the term. The debt current in 1 year, that was all checked to your amortization schedules, and that all looks like it's in place. And then your long-term debt, that's your red, those are your bonds or leases that you're paying off steadily over the years. And you can see that nice progression downward as you head towards having almost no debt. The pink, or it looks purple there, is actually your net pension liability. This is not something that you're making payments on. You don't get an invoice for this, but it is something that goes on your financial statements, and it is increasing. This is related. It's the city of Erlanger's portion of the CSRS net pension liability that goes on everybody's financial statements. And they will be clawing that back through pension increases. When the budget comes out, you'll see the pension increase in your budget both this year and next. So I would consider really your pension expenditures to be one of probably your biggest hurdles as you move forward with the city in budgeting in the next couple of years. So that's just something to keep an eye on, and that's why it's there, is that large unfunded liability.
Mr. Chamberlain?
Yes, sir.
So as those expenses rise for us, does the liability, is the liability expected to go down?
At some point, now that they are more realistic in their funding model for the CSRS, now that we're starting, we've reduced the we reduced the interest or the return rate. I think they had a 4% growth rate built in. Now that they've removed some of that, that's made these numbers larger, but it should make them more realistic. And so now they've increased the. You should start seeing this I think you'd start seeing this to decrease a little bit over time. I'm not certain if it'll come next year. I think that's probably a bit early, but basically with a really good economy or with a really good stock market, and then and hopefully the investments are taking advantage of that. Hopefully you'll start to see that level off or decline slightly. But good question.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a moving target.
Okay, thank you.
The next slide shows revenues versus expenditures from all sources in the governmental funds. The green are the revenues, the red are the expenditures. Generally, a very solid gap for the city between those two. 2017 had an excess of revenues over expenditures of about 1.4 million, but that was compared to about a 2 million gap in 2016. So I circled the 2017 just to show you, $1.4 million net income is nothing to sneeze at, and it's definitely not an area where I would say, oh, you need to be concerned here, because that is a pretty significant gap, but that is a trend up. Now, that does include some capital asset and public works expenditures that you made in 2016, and those expenditures are expenditures that you don't make every single year. In 2017. There are expenditures that you don't make every single year, so you save money, make some big expenditures as they come about every 2 or 3 years. So as part of your capital budget, just be aware that you need to spread that out equally over the years and keep that gap solid, so you're not expending more than your revenue.
Okay.
The next slide just shows revenues by sources. Licenses and permits about right at $11 million. As council member referred to earlier, taxes only $4.5 million. Charges for services, that's funds that you receive for work that you do for other folks, so police, fire, et cetera. $2.1 million, intergovernmental $835,000, bond assessments $358,000. The next slide is expenditures by department. See there, total $17.6 million. Police at $5.6 million, fire and EMS $3.7 million. That capital outlay that I mentioned earlier, $2.6 million, public works at $2.1, and general government down right at about $1.8 million. The next 7 slides, I probably won't talk about these in depth, other just to kind of flash through them, Sherry, if you don't mind. But you can kind of see, and these are in your packet, and it's the amount that these have changed year over year. There's your capital outlay increase and your public works increase. So general government expenditures up slightly. Most of your others are very low or even down. And debt service could go away very quickly. The financial statements themselves, if you have them, you can follow along. I'll just hit these very quickly. Page 1 through 4 is the transmittal letter as part of the CAFR format, or the Consolidated Annual Financial Report format. This is a required introductory letter, and it's a good overview of the city. There are organizational charts. There's your GFOA certificate, things like that. The financial section begins on page 9 through 13. And that's about 3 pages to say that it's an unmodified opinion. Page 15 through 22 is the management's discussion and analysis. And I generally encourage council members, really your only homework you have from me, and my burden is easy, is to read the management's discussion analysis. It's a very good comparative overview between the 2 years, and it's a relatively easy read. And I know Steve puts a lot of effort into this, and I just encourage you to read that. It's a good executive summary of the financial statements. Page 23 is a statement of net position, and the statement of net position is your net position based on your long-term fixed assets, your long-term capital debt, and you have total assets of right at $40 million. You have some deferred outflows of about $4 million, so total assets and deferred outflows about $44 million. Again, cash and cash equivalents and investments right at $14.6 million, and then capital assets of about $22 million. Total liabilities right at $20 million. $17 million of that is the net pension liability, and only about $1 million, or actually right at $2 million, is your bond debt. So assets minus liabilities is your net position, right at $24 million. Good, strong net position for the city. Page 25 is the balance sheet. And the balance sheet is broken down by general fund, the capital assets fund, and the police forfeiture fund, and then a total. And so total assets right at 17 million, again, about $14.5 million in cash. Total current liabilities of about 991,000, so net fund balance of $16.5 million, again, solid position. Statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance is the income statement for the city. And the total governmental funds, total revenues, again, $19 million, total expenditures, 17.6, for a net excess of revenues over expenditures of right at 1.4 million. There are several other statements in here about your internal service fund, which is your health fund that you enacted again this year. Page 31 through 48 are the notes to the financial statements, and since I don't think most of you have your financial statements in front of you, I'm not going to dwell on that too much, but there's a lot of information in the notes. There's information both on the capital assets, there's information on all of your debt and the debt that's due in the next few years, information on the pension and pension disclosures, as well as a new disclosure on tax abatements that's new in 2017. The financial statements kind of wind up with some budgetary comparison schedules. I do want to point out that in your general fund, you received more revenues than you budgeted by about $222,000, and you expended about $350,000 less than you budgeted. So you had about a $573,000, if you net those two numbers, positive variance over what you budgeted in your final budget. So very good management to budget. Your department heads are doing a good job of watching what they spend and managing the budget. There are some pension disclosures in the back. Page 50 and 51 are required disclosures on the pension. And then there's a statistical narrative, 55 through 74, that's part of the CAFR. And then page 75 through 78 is the required report on internal control and compliance. Again, no segregation of duties issues, no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies to report, and no issues of noncompliance to report. So overall, very good audit report. I'm glad to get this one done. We've had it sitting here for about a month waiting for a council meeting. So we really do appreciate your efforts, and Steve again, and thank you all. Any questions? Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Montgomery, Mr. Blankenship, have you seen the full financials?
I have, yes. I read the whole report.
Is it
We
something
met
that you
last week.
Would you mind sharing it with all the rest of the council members?
Sharing it and...
Is it email or?
Oh, no, I had a paper copy.
Oh, okay.
I thought, yeah, a few weeks back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't realize
No,
they'd already gone.
I thought
Okay.
you asked me to tell
Sorry,
them
you
exactly
normally-
what it
they
said.
No, I'm sorry. I just meant a copy.
Page
Okay, I didn't
22,
realize that.
paragraph 4.
I could paraphrase.
They
but I'm not
normally
committed
have
to
those at
memory
this
yet.
meeting, so.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me? We've got very little debt left.
No.
All right.
Yeah, other than the pension debt, you don't have any. You have almost none.
Yep. Okay. If there's no other questions, we'll move on.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Sherry, can you pull up the presentation? I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. I know it's been a long evening already. This is just the first draft of this. Really, this is just sharing the goals that everybody had shared with me so that we can all see it together. So let's go ahead and, just quickly saying basically what I just said. This is sharing it's the staff the department heads, council, and mayor. Do we have to click through that? Okay, balance the budget, yes. Continue to reduce the real and tangible property taxes. Cut the spending of each department by 1% by finding efficiencies. We're still working on that. And allocating money for repairs of the city property. Continue. Keep happy, productive, long-term employees. Instituting a wellness plan. This is still something that we're working on, turning the healthcare insurance savings into the employee bonuses and developing incentives other than pay rate increases. Figuring out how to say yes. We said this last year as well. I think the staff has done a fantastic job with this. It's come back to me a multitude of times where people have said, well, I know you want us to figure out how to say yes. So sometimes it's difficult, the hoops that we have to jump through, but at least knowing what it takes is extremely beneficial to our businesses and our residents. Developing tax incentives for homeowners. This is a goal we've talked about already, and it's something that's in process. I ask everybody to be thinking about this, as well as small business owners as well. And kind of a side goal here, we want more employees to be living in Erlanger. We want them to call it home as well, not just where they work. Calling business home for businesses, or calling Erlanger home for businesses, excuse me. Business spotlight on our website. We've got a lot of businesses listed on our website, so a lot of times people can click on our website and see who the businesses are inside the city, but also spotlighting someone. You know, ultimately, what I'm thinking would be whoever we spotlight at our council meeting also gets a spotlight on the website as well. We mentioned the small business tax incentives and increasing the opportunities for our businesses to contribute to their community. This is something that a lot of businesses have mentioned to us. They want to have a part in helping out with Heritage Day or, you know, the hiring event last year. We had a huge, we had, what was it, 40 businesses that took part in that. So, I mean, a huge turnout from them. So we're hoping to give them more opportunities to contribute. Mr. Cahill, some of his goals were setting a punch list and action items in relation to the facility study. And that's a great point. That is something that we spend a lot of money to get, and something that will, you know, it gets worse or expires over time. You know, we have to address these things while it's still fresh. Developing a plan for the repairs of Stevenson Road. A lot of people mention this. So, I mean, you'll see it a multitude of times through here. Improving Dixie Highway traffic patterns. So I know we'll be talking more about these things throughout the course of the year. We'll move on. Mrs. Kyle, be a voice of the people, attracting new businesses, assisting existing businesses, and making Erlanger a better place to live. All wonderful things. Thank you. Mr. Montgomery, work on the business and homeowners incentives and focusing on the improvements of Stevenson Road. We'll need to get a new picture with a mustache. Mrs. Fetty, creating an Erlanger Business Association, creating an angel program for the police social worker, and evaluating new software that can increase the efficiency of city operations. That's a great one, and I know that's being worked on right now between the building and, or planning and, what am I trying to say? Well, yeah, Matt Allen, but also Mark Stewart, Mr. Hahn, and then also working and integrating that into our administration and the rental, you know, tracking the rental properties and things like that. And Mrs. Hoffman mentions that also later. All right, Mrs. Pitts, keeping the first responders safe. I believe you said that last year too, and I think that we've been successful so far, thankfully. Paying attention to Houston and Stevenson Road, yeah, and I think Mrs. Pitts was the only one that mentioned Houston Road. We need to still keep that in mind as well. And one thing I will comment on that, Houston Road is not one that we're going to be asking for state help from now. I mean, that is an Erlanger road, so we need to be paying attention to it. But really, ultimately, we need to know what to expect with the cinema property. Increasing the budget on street repairs. We have been increasing that over time, but I think as you'll see with the Public Works budget, we're increasing it even further this year. Making sure we maintain our financial reserves. That's perfect timing with what Mr. Chamberlain was just showing us. I think we're doing a good job there. Well, developing a welcome packet for new residents and businesses. I understand that we've done this in the past. I think this is a phenomenal idea. I would love to see this happen again. Installing free library boxes on higher traffic pedestrian routes, and exploring green incentives to make the city more financially efficient. Wonderful, thank you. Mrs. Skidmore, resolve more of the open collection accounts, and also controlling fines and penalties on Erlanger taxpayers. Wonderful, yeah, thank you. Mrs. Cahill, decide on a fire station location and find a community center grant. Yes, thank you. Mr. Burke, keeping our citizens safe. Safe equipment for police and fire, and clean up Erlanger, especially the rentals. Wonderful. Mrs. Sedkamp, focus on a civic center. One priority, one focus. That's great. Thank you. Mr. Nicely, focus on Stevenson Road repairs and improvement. And then we've got the staff goals. Mr. Bogard, and by the way, these are in the order. There's no particular order. These are in the order I received them. Mr. Bogart said, evaluating personnel needs with projected growth of the city. Easy for me to say. Make pay scale of Public Works employees comparable with police and fire EMS. Establish a plan to repair or improve the facilities. Continue sidewalk repairs and replacement, and he was specifically referring to the sidewalk survey. So I'm following up on that. Continuing with infrastructure improvements identified in the 4-year plan. All good things. Chief Whitaker, continue pay increases for continued competitiveness. Continue efforts toward full-time only department. Come to a decision on Fire Station number 1, whether we renovate it or rebuild it. Surplus the excess equipment, specifically truck 60 and engines 51 and 53. Those are all the ones that are being replaced with the 2 new fire engines, is that correct? Thank you. Develop a succession plan, that's always a great plan. Develop a plan for increased community service. Develop a plan for employee physical fitness, and synchronize the IT database. Mr. Christofield, and some of these, this is one of the comments I had on myself here, getting updated pictures on everybody. Mr. Christofield, find better ways to communicate with residents and businesses. Publish city events for the entire year. I believe he's already done that. And create, oh, and there's a typo, create new city map and street index. Chief Brendel, improve communications with the community, improve training and development, succession planning. Oh, wait a second, is that right? Was that all combined together? I think it was. I'll have to reread that. Sorry if I messed that up, Chief, but if that's different than your goal. Stay at the forefront of technology to assure safety of officers and navigate the transition of dispatch needs. Sherry Hoffman, restructure the department to account for anticipated retirements and input rental property information into the building department software. Mr. Hahn, get SmartGov program or something similar up and running. update the webpage to advertise economic development and tax incentives. That's a great one. That got highlighted for me when Pat Wingo came here from Triad, and she was talking about some of the other cities' tax incentives, and she had a packet on each one. And I said, "Where's the Erlanger packet?" And she said, "Well, you guys don't have it on your website, so I don't have one." So people are looking for that and collecting that information. Promote the code officer, promote one of the code officers, and I believe he said specifically Sean Sims, up to level 1 building inspector. Mr. Bodie, develop duties, procedures, and policies of the finance department, and develop an RFP for selecting an auditing firm. Mr. Allen, support the technology needs of all departments and improve the communications with the public through technology like live streaming, which I believe we were doing tonight. Did I hear that correctly? Did anybody else catch that Mr. Blair was watching us on YouTube before he came in here? That was kind of interesting to me. Okay, so our next steps, picking an item on your list and begin to make advancements on that. Ultimately, it takes the input of everybody here and the efforts of everybody to make these things happen. And then the other part of it is making sure that we allow for it in the budget. So we'll be talking about, we'll need to keep a lot of these items top of mind when we come to the budget retreat on March 3rd. So that's that. Any comments or discussion? All right, great. Wonderful, thank you. There's no other items on the agenda, so with that, I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn. Motion by Mr. Nicely, second by Mrs. Kyle. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Meeting adjourned.